When life becomes crowded with appointments, responsibilities, and the quiet weight of years gone by, stillness can feel almost impossible to reach. Yet, somewhere along the way, especially in the second half of life, we begin to realize that stillness isn't a luxury we earn. It's something our hearts quietly ask for, something healing, something essential. I remember a morning not long ago, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of warm tea. The world outside was rushing, cars passing, phones buzzing, headlines screaming for attention. But in that small pocket of quiet, I felt something settle inside me. A softness, a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It reminded me how powerful even a few minutes of stillness can be. So today, I want to share 7 simple ways to weave stillness into your busy day. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated. Just small practices that help you slow down enough to hear yourself again. A quiet walk without your phone, a warm cup held with both hands, a minute of deep breathing before you answer the next call. These tiny pauses won't change the world around you, but they just might change the way you move through it, with more clarity, more peace, and a gentler sense of balance that feels like coming home to yourself.
I used to wake up the way most people do these days, with my phone lighting up the room before the sun even had a chance. I'd open my eyes and fall straight into the noise. News alerts, emails, messages, the world already demanding something from me before I'd taken my first real breath. It's strange how quickly a day can slip away when it begins in chaos. And for a long time, I thought that was just the way life had to be. But then, one morning, something inside me whispered, "Stop. Not forever, just for a moment." So I sat on the edge of my bed, feet on the floor, hands resting gently on my knees. I didn't try to meditate or clear my mind. I simply breathed, slowly, intentionally. 2 minutes, that's all I gave myself. 2 quiet, ordinary minutes. And yet those minutes changed something. They softened the edges of the day. They reminded my body that I wasn't running from anything. They told my nervous system, "You are safe. You can slow down now." It felt like opening a window in a stuffy room, a small shift, but suddenly there was air again. I kept practicing those 2 minutes, day after day. Sometimes they were warm and peaceful. Sometimes they were messy, filled with restless thoughts. But the ritual itself became an anchor, a gentle way of arriving in my own life before the world arrived at me. What surprised me most wasn't how calm I felt, but how much more present I became. I started noticing the quiet details I once rushed through. The way morning light glows on the countertop, the soft sound of the kettle warming, the coolness of the floor beneath my feet. These small moments, once invisible, began to feel like tiny invitations back to myself. And as the weeks passed, something deeper began to shift. I stopped starting my day in defense mode. I stopped bracing myself for the noise. Instead, I moved into each morning with a sense of steadiness, like I had already chosen peace before anything had the chance to pull it away. We often think transformation requires big changes, dramatic decisions, or new routines that reshape our entire lives. But sometimes the most powerful shift comes from the smallest act, 2 minutes of quiet before the world wakes up. For those of us who've carried decades of responsibility, pressure, and noise, who've lost pieces of ourselves in the rush of modern life, this practice is a reminder that calm isn't something we have to chase. It's something we can create. one breath at a time. So, tomorrow morning, before your phone, before the news, before the world asks anything of you, pause, sit, breathe. Let your mind arrive slowly, gently, without force. You deserve a peaceful beginning. You deserve a moment that belongs only to you. And sometimes 2 quiet minutes are enough to change everything.
I used to think stress was something I simply had to carry, like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. There were days when my shoulders felt tight, my thoughts scattered, and my patience thin. Maybe you know that feeling too. The kind of tension that creeps in quietly, stays longer than it should, and makes even the smallest things feel bigger than they are. For years, I tried to push through it, believing that the only way out was to keep moving. But all that did was exhaust me even more. Then one morning, something shifted. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the sun barely rising, my coffee cooling beside me. My mind was already running. Bills, appointments, people I needed to call, things I needed to fix. My heart felt tight. For some reason, I decided to stop. Not to think, not to plan, just stop. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath in through my nose. Then another, and another. 5 breaths, nothing more. But those breaths felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. The air inside me changed. My heartbeat softened. The noise in my head faded, just enough for me to feel like myself again. It was such a simple thing, almost too simple. But it worked. And throughout the day, whenever stress tried to creep back in, I paused and did it again. 5 slow breaths. In and gently out. Each time, the world felt a little less heavy. Over the months, this small practice became something I leaned on, something that reminded me that my mind doesn't need a full reset, just a quiet moment. We often underestimate the power of slowing down, the power of choosing stillness in a world that constantly demands our attention. But the truth is, peace isn't something grand or distant. Sometimes it's just those 5 breaths, the space between what overwhelms us and what grounds us. I've shared this with friends, with family, with anyone who's ever told me, I feel tired and I don't even know why. And every time they come back and say the same thing. It helps. Not because it fixes everything, but because it brings us home to ourselves, even for a moment. So the next time you feel the pressure rising, the tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts, the weight of too much, pause. Put your hand gently over your heart, if you want. Close your eyes and take 5 slow breaths, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Let each breath be a reminder that you are here, that you are safe, and that you don't have to carry everything at once. You might be surprised, just like I was, by how quickly your mind resets, how your body softens, and how peace finds its way back in. Sometimes all we need is a moment. Sometimes all we need is 5 breaths.
I used to walk with a purpose, to get somewhere, to burn calories, to check off one more box on a long list of shoulds. My steps were quick, clipped, restless. Even on quiet streets, my mind was loud, racing ahead to whatever waited for me next. But one morning, something in me softened. I stepped outside not to accomplish anything, but simply because I felt the need for air, for space, for a moment that didn't demand anything of me. The world looked different when I slowed down. The air felt cooler on my skin. The trees, usually just background, seemed to breathe with me. I noticed the gentle crunch of gravel under my shoes, the steady rhythm of my own footsteps, a rhythm I hadn't heard in years. There was no destination, no timer, No pressure to make it count. It was just walking, slowly, intentionally, almost tenderly. For the first time in a long time, my shoulders dropped, my breath deepened, the knot I'd been carrying in my chest, the one I couldn't name, quietly began to loosen. It felt as if I'd stepped out of the noise and back into myself. There's something healing about moving without a goal. When you walk slowly, not for fitness, not for steps, but simply for the act of moving, life begins to settle. The mind, always rushing ahead or replaying the past, finally finds a place to rest. You start hearing your own thoughts again. The real ones, the honest ones, the ones that get buried under daily noise. And sometimes you hear nothing at all, just silence. A soft, comforting silence that reminds you you're still here, still whole, still capable of feeling grounded. I think many of us, especially as we get older, carry more than we admit. Worries about family, about health, about time passing faster than we expected. We rush through our days because it feels easier than sitting with everything happening inside us. But walking slowly, it gently invites those feelings back into the light, not to overwhelm us, but to be acknowledged, to be understood. As I continued that slow walk, I realized something simple but powerful. The body knows how to guide us back home. The gentle forward motion, the steady breath, the quiet surroundings, they remind us we're allowed to pause, to reset, to return to ourselves, even in the middle of a busy life. Now, whenever the world feels heavy or too fast, I step outside and walk without urgency. I let the path lead me instead of pushing myself along it. And each time, I'm reminded that peace isn't always found in grand moments or perfect days. Sometimes it's found in the soft sound of your own footsteps, moving slowly, carrying you back to who you were always meant to be. I used to believe that calm was something I had to go out and find. A quiet vacation spot, a peaceful weekend getaway, someplace far from responsibilities, noise, and all the things that kept my mind spinning. But as the years passed, I realized that peace doesn't always come from escaping. Sometimes it begins with creating one small corner of stillness inside our own home. I remember the day I finally cleared a little space for myself. Nothing grand, just a simple chair by the window, a plant I'd nearly forgotten to water, and a book I'd been meaning to read for months. No TV humming in the background, no phone buzzing with reminders or news alerts, just light, air, and a bit of silence I hadn't heard in years. When I sat down, it felt strange at first, like I was breaking some unspoken rule that every minute must be productive. But as the sun warmed my shoulder and the quiet settled around me, something softened. I felt myself exhale, really exhale, for the first time all day. That tiny corner became my refuge. Whenever the world felt loud, whenever the to-do lists grew too long, or the news felt too heavy, I'd return to that chair. Sometimes I'd read a page or two. Sometimes I'd watch the light shift across the floor. Other times, I'd just sit there with my thoughts, letting them rise and fall like gentle waves. And in that simple act of being still, I found a sense of calm I didn't know I'd been missing. What surprised me most was how quickly that calm began to spill into the rest of my life. I became less reactive, more patient. I listened more closely. I moved more slowly, but somehow more intentionally. The noise of the world didn't disappear, but it stopped owning me. I had a place to return to, a place that reminded me I didn't have to match the speed of everything around me. We don't need a big house, expensive furniture, or perfect decor to create this kind of sanctuary. All we need is a space that feels like a gentle pause, a place that says, you can rest here. A chair, a plant, maybe a book. A little corner where your mind can unclench, where your heart can breathe, where you can remember that you are more than the noise, more than the rushing, more than the endless demands of modern life. Maybe that's the real secret to finding peace again. Not waiting for the world to quiet down, but giving ourselves permission to create quiet, one small space at a time. And when life feels overwhelming, that little refuge can become the doorway back to ourselves, steady, grounded, and finally, deeply calm.
There's a moment in every day that we often overlook, a moment so small, so ordinary, that it slips past without notice. For me, it happened one afternoon when my mind felt scattered in 100 directions. Emails, news alerts, group messages, everything pulled at me like little strings I couldn't cut loose from. I was standing in my kitchen, phone buzzing on the counter, tabs open on my laptop, thoughts running faster than my breath. And then, almost without thinking, I turned my phone face down. I closed every tab. I let the silence settle. At first, it felt strange, almost uncomfortable. The world had trained me to respond, to stay connected, to keep up. But as the minutes passed, something inside me softened. The air felt a little lighter, the room a little quieter. My mind, usually packed tight like a suitcase before a trip, finally had space to breathe. I could hear the low hum of the refrigerator, the distant rustle of leaves outside, even the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. It was just a few minutes, but it felt like a reset I didn't know I needed. We don't realize how much weight the digital noise adds to our days. The constant pings, the endless scrolling, the silent pressure to always be on. For many of us, especially in the middle chapters of life, it's easy to feel worn down by that invisible pull. We tell ourselves it's normal, that everyone lives this way now. But the truth is, our minds aren't built for constant connection. They're built for rhythm, for breath, for quiet moments where we can hear ourselves think again. When we give ourselves even a small break, something shifts. Focus returns, the frantic edges soften. The world feels less overwhelming, not because anything changed outside, but because something calmed inside. Sometimes peace isn't found in a weekend getaway or a long vacation. It's found in the tiny decisions we make during an ordinary day. Decisions like turning the phone face down, closing the tab that can wait, or stepping away long enough to feel sunlight on our skin. I've come to believe that these quiet pauses are not luxuries. They are necessities. Moments when we reclaim our attention, our presence, and our sense of self. And the beautiful thing is, it doesn't take much. 5 minutes, 3 minutes, even a single deep breath taken with intention can bring us back to center. So the next time you feel your mind tugged in too many directions, try it, just for a moment. Turn the phone over, close everything, let silence meet you where you are. You might be surprised by how quickly clarity returns, how gently peace settles in, and how much lighter the world feels when you give yourself permission to simply pause.
I used to eat the way I lived, fast. Breakfast was something I grabbed on the way out the door. Lunch was a sandwich eaten over emails. Dinner was whatever I could put together while thinking about the next day. I didn't taste much. I didn't pause. I didn't notice. Food was fuel, and I treated my life the same way. Something to push through, something to get done. But one afternoon, everything shifted. I was sitting alone at the kitchen table, a simple bowl of homemade soup in front of me. Outside, the late-day sun was falling across the counter in soft, warm stripes. For the first time in a long time, I set my phone aside. I took a slow breath, and I took a slow bite. The warmth, the salt, the comfort, it all came alive in a way I hadn't felt since childhood. And I realized this small moment, this tiny act of eating slowly, felt like coming home. Since then, I've learned that meals are not just about food. They're about presence, about honoring the hands that prepared it, the journey that brought it to the table, and the body that receives it. When we eat slowly, we remind ourselves that life isn't meant to be rushed through. We make space to breathe, to feel, to reconnect with the simplicity we've forgotten. I've started treating meals as quiet rituals, lighting a small candle, sitting by the window, listening to the gentle hum of the house settling around me. I taste my food. I savor the warmth of my coffee, the sweetness of a ripe peach, the grounding comfort of a warm piece of bread. Somehow, everything becomes more vivid, more meaningful. And what surprised me most is how this one habit began to transform the rest of my day. When I eat slowly, I move slowly. I think more clearly. I speak more gently. It's as if that small pause at the table teaches my whole body how to be present again. The urgency fades, the noise softens. The world becomes less of a race and more of an experience. For many of us, especially after years of rushing, slowing down feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. But inside that discomfort is an invitation to return to ourselves, one quiet bite at a time. So maybe the next time you sit down to eat, even if it's something simple, even if the day has been heavy, just pause. Taste your food. Let the meal be a moment of gratitude rather than another task to finish. Because the truth is, peace rarely arrives in grand moments. It slips in through the simple ones: a warm meal, a slow breath, a quiet table, and sometimes that's all we need to remember what it feels like to be alive, present, and deeply, quietly human. I used to end my days the same way many of us do, lying in bed with my mind still racing. My body was exhausted, but my thoughts kept running laps around everything that went wrong, everything I didn't finish, everything I feared might happen tomorrow. It felt like carrying the whole day into the night, hoping sleep would somehow drown out the noise. But sleep rarely comes to a mind still holding on too tightly. One evening, after another restless night, I sat at the edge of the bed with the lamp turned low. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost sacred. Instead of letting my thoughts swirl, I took a deep breath and asked myself two simple questions. What worried me today? And what am I thankful for? I didn't write a long list, just a few honest lines. I admitted what weighed on me, and then, gently, I named what warmed me. A kind smile from a stranger, a soft breeze through the window, a phone call from someone I love. It was surprising how something so small made the room feel lighter. By acknowledging my worries, they loosened their grip. And by naming my gratitude, I softened the edges of the day. It felt like cleaning a small corner of my mind, enough to make space for rest. Since then, this has become my nightly ritual. No rules, no pressure, no perfect journal pages. Just a moment of honesty and a moment of grace. Some nights my worries feel heavy, but even then, putting them down on paper helps me leave them there. And some nights, my gratitude is the thing that brings me back to myself, reminding me that even on hard days, there was still something gentle, something good. For those of us who've lived long enough to know how quickly life rushes past, this practice is more than a routine. It's a quiet invitation to return home to our hearts before sleep, to clear the mental clutter we've carried all day, to release what we cannot change, to treasure what we still have. When we do this, we don't just fall asleep, we rest. We enter the night with a lighter mind, a calmer spirit, and a deeper sense of peace, the kind we've been longing for, maybe without knowing it. So tonight, before you turn off the light, try it. Ask yourself what worried you today. Then ask what you're thankful for. Let the answers be simple, honest, human. Let them make space inside you. And when you finally close your eyes, may your sleep be soft, steady, and peaceful, the kind that heals you from the inside out.
I used to believe that stillness belonged to people whose lives were quieter than mine. People who lived in the countryside, people who didn't have deadlines, grown children, bills, or a phone that never seemed to stop buzzing. I thought peace was something that happened after life slowed down. But life, as we all learn, doesn't slow down on its own. It keeps moving, and somewhere along the way, so do we, often faster than we realize. One morning, not so long ago, I caught myself rushing through a day that hadn't even begun. The sun wasn't fully up, yet my mind was already miles ahead, thinking about appointments, errands, worries that didn't even belong to that day. I stood at the kitchen counter, coffee in hand, and for a moment, I simply stopped. I watched the steam rise. I felt the warmth against my palms, and it struck me how long it had been since I truly noticed anything. That tiny pause lasted no more than 10 seconds, but it felt like a door opening, a reminder I didn't know I needed. Stillness isn't something reserved for a different kind of life. It doesn't require silence, endless free time, or a perfect morning routine. It lives in small moments we choose intentionally, moments we gently repeat until they become part of us. I began collecting these moments slowly, like little stones in my pocket, sitting on the porch before the day really begins, taking a longer breath before I speak, letting the warm water run over my hands a few seconds longer while washing dishes, looking outside instead of checking my phone. Just small things, ordinary, almost invisible, yet each one felt like it gave me a piece of myself back. And the truth is, when we allow ourselves these tiny pauses, something shifts. The noise doesn't disappear, but it loses its power. The world doesn't become slower, but we do. And in that gentle slowing, we find room to breathe, to think, to feel, to remember what matters. If you've been moving through your days on autopilot, if you've been carrying more than your share of weight, if you've forgotten what calm feels like, this is your reminder. You deserve stillness. Not someday, not when life gets easier. Now. You deserve moments that soften your shoulders, moments that remind you of who you are beneath the noise, moments that bring balance and meaning back into your day. Stillness won't arrive all at once. It comes in small pieces, chosen with care. But each piece adds up. Each pause becomes a path back to yourself. So take one small moment today. Just one. Let it be enough. Peace doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the space you choose to make for it.
There was a time when life felt like a storm I was quietly trying to stand through. Days packed too tightly, thoughts running too fast, and a heaviness I could never quite name. Then, little by little, I began learning the power of slowing down. A warm cup of tea in the morning, a quiet walk at dusk, a single deep breath when the world felt too loud. These small moments didn't fix everything, but they reminded me that peace is still possible, even in a busy world. If this video brought you a bit of comfort or clarity, I hope you'll subscribe to Simple Earth Studio,
a place where we honor the beauty of slow living, gentle days, and mindful presence. Together, let's build a calmer, kinder life, one simple moment at a time.